I'm 75 now, and I can't remember anybody except the Queen bee.
It started with a quiet change that almost nobody noticed. A portrait that had occupied a respected place inside Princess Catherine's private office suddenly vanished. No announcement, no explanation, no acknowledgement from the palace. But when royal staff began whispering about whose portrait had disappeared, the silence became louder than any official statement. Because the missing face belonged to Queen Camilla, and Catherine was finally ready to explain why. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. At first, the disappearance seemed insignificant. Royal offices are adjusted all the time. Paintings are moved. Furniture is replaced. Photographs come and go. Palace insiders reportedly brushed off questions and described the change as nothing more than routine redecorating. Yet something about this particular removal refused to fade away. The whispers did not stop. Instead, they spread through palace corridors, private offices, and royal circles with astonishing speed. People were not asking what had been removed. They were asking why. Those closest to Catherine allegedly noticed the change before anyone else. Staff members who had grown accustomed to seeing Queen Camilla's portrait in its familiar place suddenly found the space empty. There was no replacement, no new display, just an absence that seemed to carry a message of its own. In a family where symbolism often speaks louder than official statements, the missing portrait quickly became the subject of intense speculation. As days turned into weeks, rumors began circulating among royal commentators and journalists. Some believed the portrait had simply been relocated. Others suspected there was a deeper story hidden beneath the palace's carefully maintained silence. Every appearance Catherine made seemed to add fuel to the mystery. During several private engagements, questions reportedly surfaced behind closed doors. Those who attended claimed curiosity was growing rapidly, yet no answers were forthcoming. The more the palace remained silent, the more people became convinced that something significant had happened. What made the situation even more intriguing was Catherine herself. According to various reports, she seemed unusually determined not to address the subject publicly. For someone known for measured communication and careful diplomacy, that silence appeared deliberate. Some interpreted it as respect. Others viewed it as restraint. But those following the story closely began to suspect that Catherine was waiting for the right moment. Not because she wanted to avoid the controversy, but because the truth behind the decision could not be explained in a single sentence. Meanwhile, public fascination continued to grow. Social media discussions intensified. Royal observers revisited old interactions, searching for clues they might have overlooked. Every photograph, every appearance, every reported private meeting became part of a larger puzzle. Why would Catherine remove a portrait of the Queen Consort from her personal office? What had changed? And perhaps most importantly, why was nobody willing to explain it? Behind the scenes, the pressure reportedly continued building. Questions reached palace aides. Journalists pursued leads. Courtiers exchanged theories. Yet the answers remained hidden behind the thick walls of royal discretion. Then, after weeks of mounting speculation, something shifted. Catherine reportedly came to a conclusion. The rumors had grown too large. The assumptions had become too numerous. If the story continued without clarification, others would define the narrative for her. And that was a risk she appeared unwilling to take. What nobody realized at the time was that the missing portrait was merely the visible clue. The real story had started long before the frame was ever removed from the wall. It involved trust, loyalty, changing priorities, and decisions that had quietly reshaped relationships within the highest levels of the monarchy. The portrait was not the beginning of the controversy. It was the consequence of it. And as Catherine prepared to finally break her silence, an even more complicated truth was waiting just beneath the surface. But removing the portrait was never about decoration. It was the final chapter of a story that had been unfolding behind palace doors for much longer than anyone realized. For years, Catherine and Camilla appeared united in public. Smiles were exchanged, appearances coordinated, and official duties carried out without visible conflict. Yet beneath the polished image of royal harmony, subtle differences in approach, loyalty, and influence were slowly creating invisible cracks that few outsiders could fully see. The deeper people looked into the mystery surrounding the missing portrait, the more they realized the story had not begun with a frame being taken down from a wall. It had begun years earlier, during a period when Catherine and Camilla seemed to represent two different eras of the monarchy moving carefully under the same roof. To the public, everything appeared stable. They attended major events together, supported royal causes, and projected an image of unity that reassured both the nation and the institution. But inside royal circles, there were whispers that harmony and agreement were not always the same thing. In the early years, many believed the relationship was genuinely cooperative. Catherine was still finding her place as a future queen, while Camilla was steadily establishing herself within the highest levels of royal life. Both women understood the importance of stability. Both recognized the immense pressures attached to their positions. Yet, as responsibilities grew, so did the differences in how they viewed the future of the monarchy. Catherine increasingly focused on modernization, public engagement, and creating a stable environment for William and their children. Her priorities centered around the next generation. She appeared determined to shape a monarchy that could adapt to changing times while maintaining public trust. Those close to royal operations reportedly admired her long-term vision. She was not simply preparing for tomorrow's headlines. She was preparing for decades ahead. Camilla, however, was often associated with a different approach. Her influence was rooted in established relationships, trusted advisors, and long-standing royal networks that had been built over many years. She understood the traditional structures of palace life and knew how power moved behind closed doors. Supporters viewed this as experience and wisdom. Critics saw it as a determination to preserve existing influence. Whatever the interpretation, the contrast between the two women was becoming increasingly difficult to ignore. According to palace insiders, courtiers quietly began noticing signs of distance. Nothing dramatic, nothing that would trigger public concern. Instead, it was the kind of gradual shift that only those working closely within royal circles could recognize. Conversations reportedly became more formal. Coordination became more structured. Shared priorities seemed less obvious than before. While public appearances continued smoothly, private dynamics were allegedly becoming more complicated. The challenge was that neither woman openly acknowledged any disagreement. The palace remained committed to presenting a united front. Yet rumors persisted that several private disputes had occurred over matters ranging from royal strategy to influence within key decision-making circles. Details remained hidden, protected by the culture of discretion that surrounds the monarchy. But the persistence of those rumors suggested there was more happening beneath the surface than the public would ever fully know. As time passed, those invisible cracks widened. Small differences evolved into larger questions. Questions about direction. Questions about priorities. Questions about who would ultimately help shape the monarchy's future. And while neither Catherine nor Camilla appeared willing to escalate those tensions publicly, circumstances were moving toward a point where silence would no longer be enough. Because somewhere within those growing divisions lay a disagreement so significant that it would eventually reshape everything people thought they understood about their relationship. And as those differences deepened, one particular dispute would force Catherine to make a decision that could no longer remain hidden. According to whispers circulating through royal corridors, a single incident transformed private tensions into something far more serious. What began as a disagreement over royal priorities quickly became a question of trust, influence, and the future direction of the monarchy itself. For a long time, the growing distance between Catherine and Camilla existed in a gray area where rumors thrived, but facts remained hidden. Palace insiders spoke cautiously. Courtiers avoided direct answers. Even those closest to the situation reportedly struggled to understand where ordinary disagreements ended and genuine conflict began. Then, according to accounts that gradually surfaced within royal circles, a single confrontation changed everything. It was not a public scandal. There were no official statements. Yet those who heard fragments of the story described it as a turning point that neither side could simply move beyond. Reports suggest the disagreement emerged during discussions involving the future direction of royal initiatives and the growing influence surrounding key decisions. What initially appeared to be a routine difference of opinion allegedly evolved into a much deeper dispute about authority itself. Who should shape the monarchy's next chapter? Whose vision would carry the greatest weight as the institution prepared for a future beyond its current challenges? These were not simple questions. They struck at the heart of royal power. According to various accounts, senior aides soon found themselves navigating increasingly difficult territory. Individuals who had spent years serving the institution suddenly faced competing priorities from figures they deeply respected. Conversations reportedly became more sensitive. Meetings grew more guarded. Every recommendation carried potential consequences. The atmosphere was not one of open warfare, but of growing uncertainty, where every decision seemed capable of shifting delicate balances that had existed for years. At the center of the dispute stood Catherine, determined and increasingly confident in her role. Those close to royal operations reportedly viewed her position as focused on stability, long-term planning, and preparing the monarchy for future generations. Yet others believed her growing influence was creating unavoidable tensions within established structures. As the disagreement intensified, another crucial figure emerged. William. According to palace whispers, William strongly supported Catherine throughout the dispute. That support carried enormous significance. He was not merely a husband standing beside his wife. He was the future king, a figure whose opinion naturally shaped the direction of countless royal decisions. His reported backing transformed what might have remained a private disagreement into something far more consequential. Suddenly, the issue was no longer confined to differing viewpoints. It became a test of influence within the institution itself. The emotional consequences were reportedly profound. Trust, once assumed, allegedly began to weaken. Individuals who had worked together for years found themselves questioning motives and intentions. Long-standing relationships became strained by uncertainty. Every interaction was examined for hidden meaning. Every decision sparked fresh speculation. The sense of unity that had once appeared so effortless now seemed increasingly fragile. What made the situation especially significant was that its effects did not disappear when meetings ended. According to insiders, the disagreement left lasting marks throughout palace circles. People remembered it. Conversations referenced it. Decisions were interpreted through its shadow. Even when public appearances projected calm and stability, many believed something fundamental had changed behind the scenes, and that change would eventually become impossible to conceal. Because once trust is tested at the highest levels of the monarchy, the consequences rarely remain hidden forever. What began as a private dispute was already starting to reshape relationships in ways that would soon become visible to everyone watching closely. Yet the conflict was no longer confined to private meetings. It soon began affecting the symbols and spaces that represented royal relationships. In royal life, portraits are never just portraits. Every photograph, painting, and placement carries meaning. They reflect loyalty, respect, history, and sometimes political reality. Removing one can send a message more powerful than a public speech, and Catherine understood that better than anyone. By the time whispers of the disagreement had spread through palace circles, the story had already evolved beyond private conversations and conflicting visions. What made the situation so compelling was that the monarchy has always communicated through symbols as much as words. Every invitation carries meaning. Every seating arrangement tells a story. Every title, appearance, and gesture is carefully considered. And nowhere is that symbolism more visible than within the private spaces occupied by senior members of the royal family. That is why the disappearance of Queen Camilla's portrait sparked such intense fascination. It was not merely about what had been removed. It was about what that removal appeared to represent. Those familiar with royal tradition understand that office displays are rarely random. The portraits chosen to occupy those spaces often reflect relationships, priorities, and personal respect. They can serve as reminders of history, acknowledgments of loyalty, or declarations of institutional unity. In many ways, they form a silent language understood by those who operate within royal circles. When something changes, people notice. And when a portrait associated with one of the most senior figures in the monarchy suddenly disappears, questions become inevitable. According to various reports, Catherine had spent considerable time reconsidering what her office represented, as her responsibilities continued to expand. The future Princess of Wales was no longer viewed solely as a supporting figure within the institution. Her role had grown dramatically. Public expectations had increased. Her influence had become more visible. As those realities evolved, insiders claim she became increasingly focused on ensuring that every aspect of her work reflected the values and priorities she wished to carry forward. That process allegedly included discussions with trusted advisors. Sources suggest conversations took place regarding symbolism, messaging, and how personal spaces within royal life could influence public perception. Some reportedly warned that removing the portrait could trigger speculation. Others believed the decision would be interpreted as a deliberate statement. Whatever advice was offered, one thing became increasingly clear. This was not a choice being made casually or emotionally. It was being weighed carefully, with full awareness of the consequences. What makes the story particularly intriguing is that the decision was reportedly not sudden. There was no dramatic moment of anger, no explosive confrontation immediately followed by action. Instead, the portrait became tied to a much larger internal reflection. As questions surrounding influence, trust, and the monarchy's future continued to linger, the image itself allegedly took on new meaning. It was no longer simply a photograph displayed in an office. It became a reminder of unresolved tensions and competing visions that had quietly shaped relationships behind palace walls. The longer Catherine reflected on those realities, the more difficult it became to ignore what the portrait represented to her personally. What had once symbolized unity now reportedly carried a different emotional weight. And eventually, a decision was reached. Not because she wanted to create controversy, but because keeping the portrait in place no longer aligned with the message she believed her office should convey. The removal itself was silent, but its meaning echoed far beyond the room where it happened. As speculation intensified, observers searched for hidden motives, secret conflicts, and dramatic explanations. Yet the truth, according to those closest to the situation, was both simpler and more profound. The portrait had become a symbol of broader tensions that could no longer be ignored. And when Catherine finally decided to address the controversy herself, she revealed that the story behind the missing image stretched far beyond a single act. When Catherine finally spoke, she revealed that the decision had been about much more than a single frame hanging on a wall. After months of speculation, Catherine reportedly decided that silence was creating more confusion than clarity. What followed was a carefully measured explanation that stunned royal watchers and reignited debates that many believed had already been settled. For weeks, the missing portrait had generated countless theories. Some claimed it reflected a personal disagreement. Others believed it signaled a larger shift within the monarchy itself. The longer the palace remained silent, the more the mystery seemed to grow. Rumors multiplied. Assumptions hardened into narratives. Questions became headlines. Eventually, according to those familiar with the situation, Catherine reached a conclusion. Remaining silent was no longer protecting anyone. It was only creating a vacuum that others were eager to fill. What happened next immediately captured attention throughout royal circles. Rather than allowing speculation to continue unchecked, Catherine reportedly chose to address the controversy directly, not through confrontation, not through accusations, and not through dramatic revelations designed to embarrass anyone. Instead, she offered an explanation that was calm, measured, and deliberate. Yet the simplicity of her remarks made them even more powerful, because beneath every carefully chosen word was a message about responsibility, priorities, and the future she believed she was helping to build. According to various interpretations of her comments, Catherine emphasized that her role within the monarchy had evolved significantly in recent years. The responsibilities before her were no longer limited to supporting royal engagements or fulfilling ceremonial duties. She was increasingly focused on preparing for the future. Every decision, every project, and every priority was being evaluated through that lens. Those close to her reportedly described a growing determination to ensure that her work reflected the values she hoped would define the next chapter of royal life. What made the explanation especially compelling was that it appeared to center less on personalities and more on principles. Catherine reportedly framed her decision around focus, purpose, and the direction she believed her office should represent. To supporters, this was an important distinction. Rather than presenting the portrait's removal as a rejection of any individual, she appeared to describe it as part of a broader effort to align her environment with the responsibilities she now carried. It was a subtle explanation, but one that carried significant weight. Predictably, not everyone interpreted her remarks in the same way. Supporters viewed them as refreshingly honest. They praised what they saw as transparency during a period when silence had fueled endless speculation. Many argued that Catherine had every right to organize her office in a way that reflected her priorities and vision. To them, her explanation demonstrated confidence, maturity, and a willingness to address difficult questions without hiding behind carefully crafted palace statements. Yet critics saw something different. Some questioned the timing of her comments. Others wondered whether the explanation itself was intended to send a message beyond the controversy. Why speak now, after remaining silent for so long? Why address the issue at all if it was simply a matter of personal preference? Those questions quickly generated a new wave of debate. The explanation had resolved some mysteries, but it had also created new ones. That contrast between admiration and skepticism only intensified public fascination. What Catherine intended as clarification became the center of an entirely new conversation. Every sentence was analyzed. Every implication was examined. Royal commentators debated the meaning behind her words. Supporters and critics found evidence for their positions within the very same explanation. And as those competing interpretations spread across royal circles, one thing became impossible to ignore. The portrait controversy had evolved into something much larger than a discussion about office decor. But the reaction to Catherine's explanation proved that the controversy was far from over. The moment Catherine's explanation became known, palace conversations reportedly changed overnight. What had once been dismissed as a minor office adjustment suddenly became one of the most discussed topics among royal insiders. The reaction was immediate. For months, many within royal circles had treated the missing portrait as a curiosity, an unusual detail surrounded by more speculation than substance. But Catherine's decision to address the matter directly transformed the entire conversation. Suddenly, the focus was no longer on a photograph removed from a wall. It was on the meaning behind that decision, the message it appeared to send, and the deeper tensions it seemed to expose. What had once existed as rumor was now being debated as a symbol of something much larger. According to palace sources, senior aides quickly found themselves discussing the implications of Catherine's remarks. Some reportedly viewed her explanation as a thoughtful clarification designed to end months of unnecessary speculation. Others interpreted it as a carefully calculated declaration about the future direction of the monarchy. The divide was striking. Two groups could listen to the same explanation and arrive at completely different conclusions. That alone revealed how sensitive the issue had become. Within royal circles, different factions allegedly emerged around competing interpretations. Supporters of Catherine saw a future queen demonstrating confidence, independence, and a willingness to define her priorities openly. They argued that her comments reflected a growing sense of responsibility and a clear understanding of the role she would one day inherit. To them, the portrait controversy was never about personal conflict. It was about focus, purpose, and preparing for the future. Others, however, viewed the situation through a different lens. Some questioned whether the explanation unintentionally highlighted existing divisions. Others wondered if the controversy revealed unresolved tensions that had been quietly building for years. These interpretations fueled fresh discussions about influence, authority, and relationships among senior royals. Questions that had previously been confined to private conversations now began attracting broader attention. As the debate intensified, attention inevitably shifted toward the future. What did this mean for Catherine and Camilla moving forward? Had the controversy changed anything significant between them? Were long-standing relationships within the monarchy evolving in ways the public could only partially understand? These questions carried enormous weight because they touched upon something people find endlessly fascinating: the human dynamics behind royal institutions. Outside palace walls, public interest surged to new heights. The story spread rapidly across news outlets, social media platforms, and royal discussion forums. Commentators dissected every aspect of Catherine's remarks. Analysts debated what had been said, what had not been said, and what hidden meanings might exist between the lines. Every interpretation generated another wave of speculation. Every answer seemed to produce even more questions. The media response only amplified the pressure. Headlines multiplied. Opinion pieces appeared. Television panels discussed the controversy from every possible angle. What began as a quiet office change had evolved into a national conversation about symbolism, loyalty, and royal priorities. The sheer scale of attention reportedly caught even experienced palace observers by surprise. Few had anticipated that a single portrait could trigger such an intense reaction. Meanwhile, the palace itself found its silence becoming increasingly difficult to maintain. Every unanswered question seemed to invite 10 more. Requests for comment reportedly increased. Journalists pursued additional details. Public curiosity showed no sign of fading. Yet despite the growing pressure, no definitive explanation emerged beyond Catherine's own remarks. And in that silence, speculation continued to flourish. But while much of the public discussion centered on whether Catherine and Camilla were divided, some observers believed everyone was focusing on the wrong issue entirely. Because beneath the headlines, beyond the rumors, and far beyond the missing portrait itself, another story was quietly taking shape, one that had far less to do with personalities and far more to do with the future of the monarchy. And while headlines focused on Catherine and Camilla, the real significance of the decision lay elsewhere. Many observers believe the portrait's removal was not about the past at all. Instead, it may have reflected Catherine's growing focus on the future, a future in which her responsibilities, influence, and visibility within the monarchy will become greater than ever before. As the controversy continued generating headlines, a different interpretation slowly began gaining momentum. Increasingly, royal observers started asking whether everyone had been looking in the wrong direction from the beginning. What if the portrait was never primarily about Camilla? What if the real story was about Catherine herself and the position she is steadily moving toward? The more people examined her explanation, the more they noticed that much of her message centered not on old disagreements, but on future responsibilities. And that realization changed the entire conversation. For years, Catherine has occupied a unique position within the monarchy. She entered royal life as an outsider, endured intense scrutiny, and gradually earned widespread public respect through patience, discipline, and consistency. Yet the role she occupies today is vastly different from the one she held when she first married William. Her responsibilities have expanded. Her influence has grown. Her visibility has increased dramatically. With each passing year, she moves closer to becoming one of the most significant figures the institution has seen in a generation. According to those who follow royal affairs closely, that evolution has fundamentally reshaped how Catherine views her role. The focus is no longer simply on supporting existing structures. Increasingly, attention appears directed toward preserving long-term stability. Every major institution eventually faces moments of transition. The monarchy is no exception. As older generations gradually step back and new leaders prepare to step forward, decisions that once seemed routine suddenly carry far greater significance. This is where William becomes an essential part of the story. Throughout the speculation, one theme has remained remarkably consistent. Catherine and William are frequently presented as a united team. Their partnership is often described as one built on shared priorities, shared responsibilities, and a shared vision for the future. Supporters view this unity as one of the monarchy's greatest strengths. At a time when uncertainty surrounds many institutions around the world, William and Catherine are increasingly portrayed as symbols of continuity and stability. That perception has only intensified public expectations. Every decision they make attracts attention. Every statement is analyzed. Every change becomes part of a larger narrative about the monarchy's future direction. The pressure attached to those expectations is enormous. Yet according to observers, Catherine appears increasingly comfortable carrying that burden. Rather than avoiding responsibility, she seems to be embracing it. And that shift may help explain why the portrait controversy resonated so deeply with the public. What once looked like a simple office adjustment gradually became linked to larger institutional questions. Questions about leadership, questions about priorities, questions about how future generations of royals will define their roles in a rapidly changing world. The portrait itself became secondary. What mattered was what people believed it represented. To some, it symbolized independence. To others, it reflected a changing balance of influence. To many, it marked another step in Catherine's transformation from senior royal to future queen. The contrast was striking. A decision that began with silence ended up sparking one of the most talked-about royal debates of the year. Yet beneath every headline and every theory was a deeper reality. Institutions survive because individuals prepare for responsibilities before they fully arrive. And many believe Catherine's actions revealed exactly that process unfolding in real time. As public fascination continued growing, attention shifted toward an even larger question. If the portrait represented a glimpse into the future Catherine is preparing for, what exactly does that future look like? And more importantly, what message was she ultimately trying to send? Which leads to the final question that still hangs over the palace today. A portrait disappeared from an office wall. On the surface, it seemed like a small change. Yet within the world of royalty, small changes often reveal the biggest truths. And the explanation Catherine finally offered may have revealed far more than she intended. Looking back, it is remarkable how a single missing portrait managed to capture the attention of so many people. There were no dramatic announcements, no official decrees, no public confrontation, just an empty space where an image once stood. Yet that absence became one of the most discussed royal stories, because it touched on something much deeper than decoration. It touched on symbolism, and in the monarchy, symbolism has always carried extraordinary power. Throughout this story, countless theories emerged. Some focused on personal relationships, others concentrated on palace politics. Many searched for hidden rivalries and secret conflicts. But perhaps the reason the controversy endured for so long was because it represented a larger question that extends far beyond Catherine or Camilla. It forced people to consider how institutions evolve, how priorities change, and how future leaders quietly prepare for responsibilities that have not yet fully arrived. The portrait itself was never the true story. It was merely the catalyst. What mattered was the meaning people attached to it. A photograph can remain fixed in a frame for years, but the relationships, expectations, and realities surrounding it are constantly changing. That is why the decision resonated so deeply. People were not reacting to a portrait, they were reacting to what they believed the portrait represented. Catherine's explanation ultimately reshaped how many observers viewed the entire situation. Rather than framing the decision as an act of conflict, she appeared to present it as an expression of focus and purpose. Whether one agreed with her reasoning or not, the explanation redirected attention toward broader themes: responsibility, leadership, preparation, the future. These ideas transformed what seemed like a minor controversy into a conversation about the monarchy's next chapter. Yet even after her remarks, many questions remained unanswered. What does this mean for the future relationship between Catherine and Camilla? Were the reported tensions ever as significant as some claimed? Has the balance of influence within royal circles shifted in ways that are not yet fully visible? These questions continue to generate discussion because they touch upon the uncertainty that accompanies every period of transition. The monarchy, by its very nature, is always balancing continuity with change. That balance is what makes this story so compelling. On one side stands tradition, represented by structures and relationships built over decades. On the other stands the future, shaped by a new generation preparing to carry the institution forward. Neither side exists without the other. Yet moments inevitably arise when those worlds intersect, creating tension, debate, and reflection. Many believe the portrait controversy became one of those moments. Perhaps that is why royal observers continue talking about it long after the portrait itself disappeared. The story left an impression because it revealed how even the smallest decisions can carry enormous meaning within royal life. A choice that appeared simple on the surface opened a window into larger discussions about identity, leadership, and the future direction of the crown. And maybe that is the lasting lesson of this entire controversy. Not that a portrait was removed, not that speculation followed, but that the monarchy continues to evolve in ways both visible and invisible. Behind every public appearance, every carefully chosen word, and every symbolic decision lies a deeper story about duty, responsibility, and the challenges of preparing for what comes next. Because in the royal family, walls may hold portraits, but sometimes the portraits reveal exactly where power, loyalty, and the future truly stand. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.